Welcome to the Live Coaching with Ryan podcast, episode 16. In this last episode with Selena, we talk about the influence of movement and movement practices on our sense of well-being and our state of mind. We also discuss any highlights, anything that stuck out for us over the course of the full conversation. Please enjoy. So I know you have limited time, and I would love to talk for another 10 to 15 minutes about movement. Is that time that you have?
Yeah, let's this is real life. Let me just
Yeah.
I have an interview in a little bit. Okay, yeah. So she has some flexibility. So we can do that, Ryan. It'd be great to be able to complete this with you.
Cool, great, good, fantastic. Because otherwise we'd have to do like a part two, which is fine. We can do that. We're on a roll, and if we can,
we have this momentum and this rapport we built up, so it's great.
Yes. So in service to that, you had mentioned this may be a great way to segue, a great time to segue into movement, and I very much agree, because again, now we're talking about the embodied experience. Of this, and there are ways to get information from our bodies that reveal some of these processes we may not be conscious of. But beyond that, also, just as I mentioned earlier, our body affects our mind. And so I'm curious to start, kind of, do you have, again, some preferred movement practices? And maybe even before that, maybe describe a little about your history with movement, and then maybe segue into preferred movement styles.
I love that question of our history with movement. It's not one I get to answer a lot or hear a lot. So thank you for framing that way. It's really inspiring. Some neat thought for me. My history with movement, I've always been a pretty physically active person. I played sports, I ran, and in high school and college, and I've been a body worker for 20 years. So when we think about movement, like, I'm moving all day long when I'm doing body work. And that's a type of movement. And I'm moving in relation and integration with another being. So that's also a type of movement.
I never considered my time as a massage therapist a movement practice, but it really is.
It's totally a movement practice, Ryan. And and I love how we've connected that you used to do body work too. I think it's just amazing stuff. And so movement has been in my life that way. And, I've always run or some kind of swim or something, yoga, had some kind of movement practice. And lately, though, in the last couple of years, I really love a practice of moving to music, but from a very, not like going out club dancing or anything, though that can be awesome too, but moving to music from like more of a meditative stance. And that doesn't mean it has to be quiet, slow music. Indeed, it can mimic all the emotions and the different waves that we go through as human beings. And if we allow our bodies to just respond to that music in the way that they want to respond, so instead of like being top down, I mentioned that earlier, like my logical brain is telling my body what to do, which is often where we move from. Now I'm letting my body kind of move to the music and kind of working more bottom up. And I love this practice. I call it the cheapest therapy around. There's different ones. I go to an organized one called 5 Rhythms. There's also, I think, conscious dance and ecstatic dance are similar, or you can do it in your own house. Just put on different types of music. But to me, what happens there, Ryan, is it integrates things that are stored in our bodies, because histories, traumas, injuries, those are all stored in our body. And we might go to all the best talk therapy in the world, but if we're not processing at a body level, we're only going to get so far. And that's why I love that the therapy world is embracing these more somatic approaches, because they are a huge piece of processing trauma and integrating experience.
Yeah, part of my therapy experience was EMDR. Which is eye movement desensitization and reprocessing. Where I wanted to process some traumatic memories. And to be clear, I would define my trauma compared to other people's trauma as very light trauma. It was a purely emotional experience that was temporaneous, i.e. it was in a short period of time. And I caught it early and acted on it early so that it would inform less of my life. And part of EMDR is literally eye movement, looking at a light bar, or there's these things that you hold in your hands, then they buzz, and you move with them. And then there's different kind of postures and ways that you might put your hands around your head or on your chest. And so for me, that was very critically important, because I got to honor and integrate the sensations of my body, and let them inform me. So I'm a very heart-centered person. So some of my emotional experience in that moment, with that triggering moment of trauma, was that I had been very vulnerable, and that vulnerability had not been honored. And so that snapped me into this depression after. It's not like it was just that one moment. Of course, there was a parade of moments before it. It was just the critical moment that caused the twig to snap.
Sure.
So for me, getting in touch with my literal chest, because that would just happen to be analogous to my experience, the vulnerability, heart-centered chest, those all happened to coincide. And so a lot of that therapy practice for me was being aware of the sensations in my chest, and that helped inform me how I was doing with processing that feeling. Even literally just talking about it right now, I can feel pressure in the center of my chest. It's significantly reduced compared to before I had therapy, of course, and that was 6 years ago. Oh my gosh. Yeah. 6 years ago was actually, I think, 5 years ago was when I wrapped my therapy, I want to say.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's, yeah.
So it sounds like you were able to use a more somatic based processing with your therapist. And I think movement practices do that too. And I wanted to also note that, different movement practices for me feel more or less valuable at different times depending on where I am.
Yeah.
I think if I'm moving into a state of activation, like actually this morning, Ryan, I had a conversation as kind of a follow-up to the one I mentioned earlier, and I recognized, from years of training my mind and body to recognize these states, I recognized how activated I was becoming. And I actually was in a position where I could go do physical exercise, and I rode my bike and I went for a run. And it was just so helpful to be able to let those chemicals that have been released, because these are activation chemicals, they're designed to help us move. If we go back to our model of how our brains are wired, and so for me to be able to direct that energy, because it wasn't a fight or flight scenario, it was more a scenario of the mind. So for me to be able to direct that and to move those chemicals through my system and not let them reside there in this highly emotional charged place was so valuable. So different movement practices are so useful at different times. Weightlifting can be really useful, having resistance against something, deep pressure, massage, deep pressure, other types of deep pressure, hugging. We know that
cuddling.
We know hugging and cuddling, these contact things are so powerful in our systems. They release this cascade of feel-good hormones, our oxytocin and our bonding. So, and that's, and that's not movement practice necessarily, but it's related to regulating our systems, which is, I think, what we've been talking about.
Yes, no, absolutely. And touch is critical to that, whether it's, platonic touch, romantic touch, sexual touch, all of those things impact our chemistry in potentially positive or negative ways, depending on the context and nature of it.
Sure.
And so, when people talk about significant touches each day, there really is a brain development component of significant touches. And it can be a high five, it can be a fist bump, it can be a hug, it can be whatever. But our bodies need some type of touch stimulation, and we are social animals. And so if that touch can be interactive and social, all the better. I can touch this table and be conscious of that. That can literally help me. There was a day in the depth of my depression when I just had an intuition to put my hand on the wall and stare at my hand. And I didn't know what value I was going to gain from that, but I just decided to trust it. And I literally just put my hand on the wall and just stared at my hand. Yeah. And after about 30 seconds, I felt a calm, and I honestly cannot tell you why. I suspect that there's a combination of things, from the bringing of my awareness to the sensation in my hand, me bringing multiple senses to the same moment. There's all sorts of possibilities when you're kind of in a sea of apathy, or a sea of gray or black, or wherever I happened to be at that time, because I don't remember exactly which day it was. But that was critical. So I think that, again, that is a movement, that is a physical practice that is valuable to me.
That was a movement prayer. And I think the things that you named were probably really at play there in that challenging moment, Ryan. The shifting your attention, the touch and proprioceptive input of the pressure of your hand against the wall. And they just allowed you to shift your focus of your brain. And that's also what we're talking about here is how do we shift and direct the attention of our brain?
Yeah,
So
absolutely.
shifting it from sympathetic to parasympathetic, alarm response to relaxation response,
Yes, alarm. I talk
shifting,
about turning off the alarm all the time.
yeah. And we want that alarm to be there. We just don't want to be run by it.
Yes.
It's like we said, yeah, but the movement practices are so vital. And I think they help us, for me, they help me connect into my body, that it's not just like my teacher had so humorously said, it's not like my body is not just designed to carry my brain around and be doing what I call selfing in like an endless loop of like me and my and this and that, right? So it's like stepping out of that and zooming our perspective, our lens out from just our brain and this self place to like, oh, I am a whole being.
Yeah.
Oh, like, oh, I have a body. Oh yeah, like many of us forget that a lot.
Mhm. I
So
really do believe so. It's
yeah,
just to me reminding myself when I start slouching to sit up. That is a
sure.
movement practice.
Sure, it is
Yeah.
a movement, and I love that you're talking about that. That's what I call micro movement practice. And when I talk to people who have to sit in cubicles or sit at a desk all day, or they're driving long distances, and they can't do the same kind of movement practices that we might ideally do, then we start talking about micro movement practices,
Yeah.
and those can be incredibly useful as well, depending on your circumstances.
Well, and again, I think you say go meet yourself where you are.
Yeah.
My history with movement is that I grew up dancing at 3 years old. I started tap dancing. And then
Wow.
after 6 years of that, I stopped and I did some music for a little while and tried to learn to play guitar and then went back to dance and ran the gamut, jazz, hip hop, ballet, more tap, modern, whatever else. I did a lot. And then massage therapy, I mentioned, which I hadn't really considered before. I did martial arts all growing up. I did karate and
Yeah.
taekwondo and judo, jujitsu, and capoeira and Krav Maga as an adult. And so I am informed by large movements. And there have been times in the last year when I felt that sympathetic nervous system kick in, the alarm went on, and I was
Mhm.
like, what the hell is this? And now I need to decide what I want to do. And sometimes I'd have an urge to do as many push-ups as my body could do and have
Mhm.
that feeling of effort and exhaustion
Yeah.
potentially.
Yeah.
And then sometimes I decided that wasn't the experience I wanted. I chose to do my breathing exercise instead and turn off the
Yeah.
alarm that way
Yeah.
because I didn't want to potentially ramp myself up. That wasn't the interest I had in that moment. So I made a different choice.
Yeah.
So all of
Yeah.
these things, again, the journaling, the breathing, the movement, these are tools that applied regularly are universally helpful, but
Mhm.
can also be a choice of a tool in the moment.
Yeah.
I mean, 5 minutes
Yeah.
of exercise, I think, was the study. And again, I read this in the Willpower Instinct. 5 minutes of any activity is helpful. Literally walking for 5 minutes is as good for your brain as 10 minutes of walking or 15 minutes of really heavy activity, just for
Yeah.
certain base level things. Literally just do anything. Just
Yeah.
move your body consciously. Take a walk and see what that feels like. Feel your feet as they hit the ground and roll against the ground in your shoe.
Mhm. Mhm.
Feel the movement of your arms and your body. If you want to become aware of your body, go get Rolfed. I mean, that's an excruciating pain, but you will become keenly aware of your body. And then after a Rolfing session, take a 20-minute walk and you'll feel alien in your own body.
Yeah. Yeah.
Until you've done 10 sessions, then suddenly you're like, oh, this is my body now. It's a
Yeah.
totally different experience.
Well, I mean, rolfing I think is sort of an extreme version, but I think body work or massage sessions in general, Ryan, and it'd be remiss, I think, you having been a massage therapist and me being one, to not talk about the impact of what that work does. And one of the main things I see it doing is connecting people to their bodies and helping drop people into their parasympathetic nervous system. Now, of course, we can work on injuries or pain or challenges, and those things bring people in the door, of course. But in a bigger perspective, in the bigger view, what I see is happening is body awareness, body connection, body-mind connection,
Yes.
and where I live in the DC area, everybody needs more connection to their parasympathetic relaxation response. So we
Yeah.
stay busy.
Yeah. Well, and I think we would be remiss not to honor some of the other purely both biological and social psychological components of movement, i.e., we are designed to move.
Yeah.
So not moving is not honoring part of our animal, and therefore will cause other types of problems.
Mm-hmm.
And so whether it's heart rate variability or literally just toning and flexibility, when you have more flexibility in your body and you just move around in your day, your body just literally feels better. When you have a capacity, when you work on your core muscles, your body just feels better because now your back feels better. You have less pain. You're able to concentrate. You have more resources in your body available to you, whether it's oxygenation,
Mm-hmm.
clarity of thought coming from the oxygenation and the heart rate variability. There's a cascading effect to having a healthy body, and a critical component of having a healthy body is movement.
Yeah.
And if you are doing things that are healthy for your body, another quote byproduct, another effect is increased confidence.
Yeah.
Because when your body is strong, it is triggering your brain that you are safe and secure. And when you feel safe and secure, you can do a lot more than when you're feeling insecure or unsafe, because now you're using those resources to try to keep yourself in a position to be okay. And if you are confident, then now all those resources go to kicking ass, right? Like doing amazing things, constantly worrying about
Sure.
the oncoming threat. I can't remember who it was, but it's in multiple martial arts. People have said the same thing, whether it's Krav Maga or Wing Chun or whatever else. Being able to fight proficiently means that you never worry about fighting again. And so, in fact, it decreases the probability that you will be in a fight, because now all of those automatic behaviors that you would have had previously, you don't have anymore. You don't have the same need to prove yourself. You don't have these needs. It's like walking through San Francisco. One time I got a weird vibe and I just thought, prepare for violence.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like, that seems like such an extreme thing to say, but actually it calmed me down, because once I just accepted my circumstance, my heart rate variability improved. I didn't have the same stress response. I was just like, oh, okay, I just keep my head on a swivel. I know what I need to do, walk confidently, and I'll be fine. And so I moved into a space of confidence and awareness, and then I just did what I needed to do.
Yeah, I love that example. And I just want to draw clearly that parallel to, we're talking about the body being prepared to take care of itself, or take care of our being, and then moving that through to our minds. When we develop these capacities of our minds to navigate challenge and navigate challenging emotions, tumultuous thoughts, all the things that present in our lives, then we also have more confidence that it's like I said at the beginning, one of the great benefits of these practices is increasing confidence in our capacity to be resilient and to deal with anything that comes our way, and to have that steadiness, which is just what you were talking about. So it's so beautiful how you tied that in, inadvertently or not, to have that confidence, regardless of our external circumstance, that we can go steadily. Not to say we don't go into emotion, but we can come back to our center and navigate that. So it's a pretty neat tie-up.
Thank you. Yeah, and actually probably a good place to transition. But I do want to honor that there are some people who have experienced violence, that when I say something like prepare for violence, for them that actually would be triggering themselves into trauma. And I want to take the moment to acknowledge that as someone who has not experienced a significant amount of violence, I was smaller, I was picked on, but that is not the same as experiencing trauma from violence. So I want to honor that and say, if I did trigger you, hey, that was not my intention. I apologize.
Yeah.
And that for me, it really was a mental practice. When I say something like that, it is a mental practice of just increasing my awareness and my presence of mind and marshaling my physical resources that allowed me to be calm out of context that could sound like prepare for violence is a good thing because you get all ramped up, and that is not what I mean. I do not mean putting yourself in unsafe situations or continuing to feel insecure or continuing to relive trauma. Please understand that.
Yeah. On that note, and I know we're wrapping up here on Ryan, but on that note, just because of, like you said, it's October 2018, there's a lot of old traumas being triggered for people right now.
Yeah.
And I'm feeling that very strongly in our area. And I think, just based on social media, also other areas. And so I'd just like to name that sometimes these practices of going inward, of closing our eyes or meditating, or even going to a meditation class where you're asked to sit among strangers with your eyes closed, feels very unsafe. And so one of the things we're really looking at in our communities is how do we create safer spaces for people who have been traumatized by violence, aggression, rape, things like this. So I just want to name that that's really on the forefront of what we're looking at right now, and just to acknowledge that those practices can feel very scary for some people. I see them as a resource and a great refuge, and I understand that that doesn't feel that way for everybody. And so that's just something I wanted to name for all of your listeners.
Yeah, no, thank you, because none of this is meant to be torturous. I once had a friend who was upset, and I offered to hug her, and she said, "No, your hugs hurt."
Yeah.
And that was, I think, my interpretation of that is I was safe. It caused her to lower her walls, and she wasn't in a position to feel her pain. She needed to be a little more numb. She needed to be able to not have her full experience in that moment. And so I honored and I acknowledged that, and just kind of stood 4 feet away from her and gave her physical space and was just present with her. And in fact, she didn't even want to talk. So we stopped talking, and I just literally stood there with her for a time until she was ready, and we talked about something else. Yeah. So none of this should be used as a cudgel. None of this should be used as a should, right? Here we are. I just said none of this should be used, right? This is the should again, right? The value of this is when they are available to you when you're ready to use them.
When and if, because I love what the Buddha talks about, this concept of verified faith, Ryan, which is don't take my word for anything. Don't take his word. Don't take anyone's word. Let those ideas inform you, expand your thinking, and then try them for yourself and see what works in your system. And I think that's a really important piece to maintain, especially at this time.
Yeah.
Do what works for you. Yeah.
Exactly. There's so many tools. And again, meet yourself where you are. Find something that works for you. It might literally just be doing the 7-11 breathing exercise, or any type of slow inhale, slow exhale. It could be literally doing 20 push-ups a day, or not 20 push-ups, sorry, 20 sit-ups a day, or 5 push-ups a day, or like literally any small thing just to move your body. Like, it doesn't have to be huge. Literally anything is valuable.
Just incrementally small, manageable, set attainable goals. I always say that, set attainable goals, and then you can build on them, but set attainable goals.
Check out episodes 5 through 8. I talk about scalable goals when I'm talking to
great.
I think that's really critical. We get into this all or nothing mode that isn't really helpful. So in the interest of time, and to wrap up, are there any takeaways from this conversation, anything that really stood out to you that you think, hey, if people are going to listen to this last 5 minutes of the episode, this would be a great thing for them to know?
I think just recognizing that there are these tools of what we talked about, mindfulness and breathing and journaling and exercise. And if we can create, and it's like we just said, it doesn't have to be those, or it could be your own version of those. And if you could just take some of those and create your own systems that support you and help you come into your center and navigate things so that we're not in such a state of overwhelm. I know so many of us are dealing with that. Those are just so valuable. So think about creating something that works for you, and start trying it. Attainable goals. Start with 5 minutes. Start with, just building on that after that. Just get that down, and then don't worry about the next step until you're ready, and you'll know when you're ready. So just start where you are. And we've been saying that a couple times here, and I totally think it's a useful thing. Start where you are. Start trying the practices. See what works for you, and then go from there. There's so many resources out there to help us get traction in these things. It's just amazing.
Absolutely. Yeah, I agree. Start from where you are. Choose something that you find interesting or fun, something that's
Yeah.
engaging to you. Fun is a great
Yes.
way to be engaged. Curious is a great way to be engaged. Choose one of these three areas potentially. I mean, I highly recommend you start with one of these three things. Start
Yeah.
with simple breathing, if not formal meditation. Start with some journaling. Start with some simple movement. Choose one, because they all branch into each other. If you want more, if you want further, try something simple that you can sustain for at least a few weeks. I would say 3 at a minimum. 6 is ideal, so that you can have the full experience of it. And you can add a little additional touches if you want. You can play with it.
Yeah.
But just do little things. Do it daily or 5 times a week or whatever. Like, just put yourself in a position to enjoy it and experiment. And because all of it's valuable. Nothing needs to be more than 5 minutes. Really, like I said, 30-second meditations I do regularly, but 5 minutes, I know I feel a greater effect from 5 minutes. If I get a solid 5 minutes of anything in, conscious physical activity, journaling, meditating, breathing, all those feel fantastic. So start small.
Yeah.
Something that's engaging to you.
The other thing I'll say that's really helpful, and this is something I share with my students, is I give them a tracking sheet, because some of us, when we're using our left linear brain, we like to check things off, and it's very satisfying. And also then we have a visual. So what are the ways we can keep these things that are important to us, but then get covered over by all the millions of other demands on ourselves, is having a tracking sheet. And we have just like a little circle for each day, and you can kind of check off, did I do this gratitude practice, this savoring practice? Did I do a daily meditation? And you can just see a visual. And if it's in front of you, it reminds you to do it as well, even in the midst of the overwhelm of all our information overload.
Thank you so much for saying that, because I used to track in my daily planner every day that I meditated or worked out, which again was typically in the morning, even before the time that's available on my particular planner. So I just write it first thing.
Yeah.
And I stopped doing that. And I stopped writing it in whenever I did it in the day. And that would be really valuable for me to do again, because then I can honor and recognize that I've been doing it and get that added psychological benefit of celebrating myself for doing it, and not simply the benefit of doing it, but actually celebrating myself for doing it, which is really great and really powerful. So thank you for bringing that up.
Yeah, absolutely.
Thank you so much for your time today, because it is definitely quite a bit longer. We're going to block an hour and a half, and now it's been 2.5 hours of hanging out.
It's way too long for people to listen to, I'm sure. Oh my goodness.
There's a reason I break it into episodes.
I know.
It's going to be 3 episodes.
It's all felt so so valuable though, Ryan. So thank you for creating this platform and this format for us to talk about these things.
Absolutely. You're very welcome. And thank you so much for showing up. I knew that we would have a very valuable conversation. I was really looking forward to today. So thank you for taking the extra time and hanging out with me and working through tech issues and getting to just hang out and have a real conversation. So thank you for that. It's great. I love it. Awesome. Thank you. Yeah. How can people find you, Selena? Yeah, thanks for asking. They can find me at my website, which is www.selena, Selena Reames.com, Reames, SelenaReames.com. Awesome. Like the show? Consider subscribing through my Patreon at patreon.com/lifecoachingwithryan. You'll get early access to shows and potentially a host of other rewards. Want more? You can also find me streaming on Twitch at twitch.tv/lifecoachingwithryan, where I play some games and I continue the conversation. I'm pretty active on Instagram. You can find me at instagram.com/educate4_life. That's where I do my book club. I record the book club episodes live on Mondays, and then I post them to IGTV. Later, I post them on YouTube. See you next time.